A small kitchen doesn't need to be a limitation. It can be a heartwarming retreat, a place where the past and present mingle in the scent of coffee or the sound of a simmering pot. I often think of the kitchens from my childhood not large or glamorous, but full of life. There was always something comforting about the way sunlight filtered across a table, catching the edges of a chipped teacup or the shine of a polished wooden spoon. Those spaces taught us that beauty does not depend on size, but on the feeling that lingers in the air. In today's world, many of us live in smaller homes or apartments, but that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice charm. In fact, small kitchens hold a special kind of intimacy. You can reach everything without strain, and each corner becomes a story waiting to be told. By blending vintage warmth, shabby chic romance, and modern simplicity, you can transform even the most modest kitchen into a place that feels dreamy and alive. This journey isn't only about decoration, it's about creating a space that cradles your memories, welcomes your loved ones, and inspires your daily rhythms. A small kitchen, when cared for with imagination, can become one of the coziest rooms in the house, a stage where life's simplest joys take place. Color has a way of setting the tone in a kitchen, and in smaller spaces, the right palette can feel like a gentle embrace. Instead of harsh whites or dark tones that shrink the room, consider softer shades: creamy ivory, pale blush sky blue, or sage green. These colors don't just brighten the walls. They seem to soften the air itself, giving the room a glow that feels both calming and hopeful. When you step into such a space, you don't notice its size, you notice its serenity. I remember visiting a friend's tiny cottage by the lake. Her kitchen couldn't have been more than a few steps wide, but she had painted the cabinets a powder blue and hung a lace curtain over the sink. Somehow, that little room felt like the most romantic place in the house. It wasn't expensive, and it didn't take a contractor's hand, just a few thoughtful paint choices and fabrics that caught the morning light. That's the magic of a gentle palette. It expands a space not only visually, but emotionally. If you're looking to transform your own kitchen, start small. A can of pastel paint for the cabinets, a soft green runner on the floor, or even a bouquet of pale flowers can change the entire feeling. These hues remind us that beauty doesn't have to be loud or complicated. In fact, the quietest colors often speak the loudest, whispering comfort and romance into every corner. There is something undeniably soothing about pastel tones when they find their way onto cabinets and walls. In a small kitchen, these soft shades don't just decorate, they transform. A set of mint green cupboards or powder blue shelves instantly lightens the room, making it feel open and welcoming. Dusty rose on a feature wall can bring warmth without overwhelming, while buttery yellow can mimic the glow of morning sunshine. These gentle colors create the illusion of more space while also layering the room with romance and cheer. I once helped my neighbor repaint her kitchen cabinets after she retired. She chose a delicate lavender, a shade she'd loved since her wedding bouquet decades earlier. As soon as the paint dried, the entire kitchen felt new, though nothing else had changed. Her eyes lit up every time she walked in, as if she had reclaimed a little piece of herself in those cabinets. That's the power of pastels. They are personal, nostalgic, and timeless. For anyone on a budget, a pastel transformation doesn't require replacing cabinetry. A single weekend with a brush and the right paint can revive tired wood and brighten old corners. Even just painting the wall behind your stove or adding pastel trim around windows can bring in that airy, romantic spirit. These soft shades remind us that kitchens are not only places to cook, they are places to feel alive, cherished, and at home. Often overlooked, the floor of a kitchen has the power to change everything about how the room feels. In a small space, dark or heavy flooring can make the room seem closed in, but painted floors invite light and whimsy. Imagine a soft whitewood floor that reflects sunlight like fresh linen, or a checkerboard of pale blue and cream that recalls cozy English cottages. These subtle choices carry a sense of nostalgia while also giving your kitchen a brighter, more spacious appearance. I once visited a seaside bed and breakfast where the owners had painted their kitchen floor in faded mint and ivory squares. The space itself was no larger than a hallway, but the light-hearted pattern underfoot made you forget its limits. The owner told me she had painted it herself on a quiet weekend inspired by the floors she remembered from her grandmother's farmhouse. That one detail transformed the entire room, giving guests the feeling of stepping into a storybook. For your own kitchen painting, the floor doesn't require perfection. It's often the small imperfections that give it charm. Choose colors that echo your cabinets or curtains so the room feels harmonious. And if painting the whole floor feels daunting, even a border of pastel trim around the edges can create romance. It's a reminder that beauty begins beneath our feet, grounding us in spaces that feel loved and lived in. Wallpaper has a way of telling quiet stories in the background, and in a small kitchen, even a little can make a world of difference. Instead of covering every wall, consider placing it behind open shelving or in the nook under the sink. A strip of floral print, a delicate stripe, or a soft toile pattern can instantly add depth and texture. Because it doesn't dominate the room, it feels like a whisper of charm, subtle, romantic, and deeply personal. I once stepped into a friend's city apartment where her kitchen was barely the size of a walk-in closet. Yet she had lined the wall behind her spice rack with wallpaper patterned in tiny lavender sprigs. The effect was magical. It drew your eye upward, made her collection of jars feel intentional, and gave the whole kitchen a breath of countryside freshness, even in the middle of a busy street. She said it reminded her of summers on her grandmother's farm, where lavender grew wild near the fence. The beauty of wallpaper accents is their flexibility. You can use peel and stick designs if you want something temporary, or invest in traditional wallpaper for a more lasting effect. And you don't need to stop at walls line the inside of cabinet doors or drawers with soft patterns for a hidden delight. These gentle touches remind us that even in small kitchens, every surface can carry a little poetry. Lighting is often the soul of a small kitchen. With the flick of a switch, a room can shift from bright and practical to soft and romantic. Instead of relying on a single overhead bulb, consider layering your lighting. Overhead pendants provide clarity when you need to chop vegetables or read a recipe. Wall sconces or under-cabinet strips can bring gentle focus to counters. And a small table lamp on a side shelf or cart adds a glow that feels almost like candlelight, inviting cozy and deeply human. I once had dinner in a neighbor's cottage where her kitchen light came from 3 different sources: a brass pendant above the sink, a vintage lantern sconce near the stove, and a tiny lamp tucked into the corner beside her teapot collection. Each cast its own warmth, and together they created a room that felt alive as though it held a heartbeat. She told me she rarely used all of them at once. Instead, she chose depending on her mood. Bright in the morning, with coffee soft and dim in the evening when the day was winding down. The joy of layered lighting is that it doesn't just serve function, it sets the stage for emotion. It allows your kitchen to adapt to you, shifting from a practical workspace to romantic retreat with ease. In a small kitchen especially, this flexibility makes every moment feel intentional, like you've painted the air with light itself. When it comes to adding romance to a small kitchen, vintage lighting has a way of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. A simple room with plain cabinets suddenly feels like a treasure when a delicate glass pendant or an old chandelier hangs above. The glow is softer, more personal, as though the light itself carries stories from another time. Even a lantern-style sconce on the wall can bring that touch of history, reminding us of cottages and farmhouses where evenings were lit by gentle flames. I once visited a cousin's farmhouse in Pennsylvania where her kitchen ceiling was too low for anything grand. Instead of a traditional fixture, she hung a pair of small crystal pendants she'd found at a flea market. They shimmered in the morning sun and gave the whole space an elegance far beyond its size. She told me the best part wasn't the look, but the memory of hunting for them with her daughter, proof that decor isn't just about design, but about the stories behind it. If you're considering vintage lighting, don't feel limited by expense. Thrift stores, estate sales, and even online marketplaces often hold forgotten gems. And if wiring feels complicated, many vintage lamps can be rewired inexpensively. The key is choosing pieces that speak to you. In a small kitchen, one special light can become the centerpiece, wrapping the room in warmth and nostalgia every time you turn it on. Metal details may seem small, but in a romantic kitchen they sparkle like jewelry. Imagine a brushed brass faucet catching the morning light or copper handles warming up a set of pale pastel cabinets. Even a few golden hooks holding teacups can elevate the space from plain to enchanting. Unlike shiny chrome that feels cold, these softer metallics bring warmth and elegance while blending seamlessly with both vintage charm and modern simplicity. I once helped a friend polish her grandmother's old copper kettle, which had sat forgotten in a garage. When we placed it on her stove, the room seemed to change instantly. The kettle wasn't just a kitchen tool, it was a bridge to the past, a reminder of family meals and hands that once worked with care. Each time the kettle whistled, it added not only sound, but memory to the room. That's the beauty of these subtle metals, they are timeless storytellers. For your own kitchen, you don't need to cover every surface in gold or copper. A single brass drawer, pull a vintage copper pan hung on the wall, or a small bronze utensil holder can achieve the effect. These accents shine gently, never shouting, and they remind us that in small spaces, the tiniest touches often carry the most romance. Even the smallest kitchens can welcome a piece of furniture with a story. A narrow wooden hutch, a shabby chic rolling cart, or a foldable antique table can add both function and soul to your space. Unlike flat-pack furniture that feels temporary, these older pieces carry history in every nick and worn edge. They offer storage, yes, but they also invite conversation, reminding us of kitchens from another era where nothing was wasted and everything had purpose. I recall an elderly neighbor who kept a petite oak sideboard in her kitchen. It had once belonged to her mother, and though the drawers were shallow, they held her favorite linens and baking tools. The sideboard doubled as her tea station, and each time I visited, she would set out cups from its cabinet, smiling as if the act itself connected her to her family's past. That piece of furniture didn't just save space, it carried her memories forward. If you're seeking a similar touch for your kitchen, explore flea markets or thrift shops. Look for smaller-scale antiques that fit your floor plan without overwhelming it. Rolling carts can be tucked away when not in use, and foldable tables can open for guests then collapse again for everyday living. These pieces prove that a kitchen doesn't need to be large to feel grand, it just needs furniture that brings character and heart into the room. In a small kitchen, an island may sound impossible, but with creativity, even the tiniest space can host one. Think of a narrow vintage console table, a rolling butcher block cart, or even a repurposed sewing table given new life. These petite islands don't overwhelm. Instead, they add a charming focal point while offering extra prep space storage or a cozy breakfast nook. The beauty lies in their adaptability. Some can be moved when needed, others tucked against a wall until mealtime. I once visited a retired teacher who had turned her grandmother's writing desk into a kitchen island. She placed it in the center of her modest galley kitchen, topping it with a slab of marble she found at a salvage yard. The desk drawers held spices and napkins, while the surface became her favorite spot to knead dough. She told me it was the first time she felt her kitchen had a soul, all because she repurposed something meaningful rather than buying new. For your own space, don't be afraid to experiment. A small console topped with floral oilcloth can brighten mornings, while a slim cart with wheels can serve as both storage and serving station. In a small kitchen, the right island isn't about size, it's about personality. A tiny centerpiece can ground the whole room, making it feel more like a gathering place than a passageway. When floor space is limited, the walls become your best ally. Wall-mounted racks, pegboards, or narrow shelves can transform unused vertical space into both storage and decoration. In a romantic kitchen, these pieces don't need to look industrial or plain. They can be painted in pastel tones, trimmed with vintage hooks, or even framed like artwork. Suddenly, your everyday utensils or mugs become part of the display, turning necessity into beauty. I once stepped into a friend's bungalow kitchen where every inch of wall space had been lovingly considered. Above her stove, a pale green pegboard held copper pans. Near the sink, she'd hung delicate floral cups from brass hooks. The effect was charming and functional, everything within reach, yet nothing felt cluttered. She laughed as she told me she hardly needed cabinet space anymore because her walls carried the load. For your own kitchen, start with one wall. Add a rack for tea towels, a row of hooks for measuring spoons, or a shallow shelf for your prettiest jars. If you're handy, a pegboard can be customized to your needs and painted to match your color scheme. This approach keeps counters free while letting your personal taste shine. In small kitchens, wall-mounted storage is more than a solution. It's an opportunity to layer character, color, and history into the very bones of your home. Storage in a small kitchen often feels like a battle, but it doesn't have to be. Instead of plastic bins or bulky organizers, consider softer, more romantic options. Woven baskets can hold onions or dish towels, wooden crates can stack neatly for extra pantry space, and enamel containers add vintage charm while keeping things tidy. These pieces do more than organize, they create a rhythm of texture and warmth that plastic could never offer. I remember visiting a family friend whose kitchen was no larger than a postage stamp, yet it felt like stepping into a country cottage. She had replaced nearly every plastic container with wicker baskets and enamel tins, many of which she had collected secondhand. On her counter sat a pale blue enamel canister labeled flower-chipped but beautiful, and beside it a wicker basket cradling fresh apples. She told me she didn't just want storage, she wanted her kitchen to feel alive, like it had been loved for generations. This approach isn't expensive. Thrift shops, flea markets, and even discount stores often carry baskets or vintage-style containers. You can stack crates along a wall or slide them beneath a bench for hidden storage. The result is practical, but also deeply romantic, reminding us that even the most ordinary items like where we keep our potatoes or tea bags can contribute to the overall charm of a room. In a small kitchen, storage should never just be functional, it should also be beautiful. When cabinets crowd a small kitchen, the space can feel boxed in as though the walls are closing around you. Open shelving offers a lighter alternative, bringing both practicality and charm. Instead of hiding everything behind doors, you allow your prettiest pieces, floral plates, teacups, glass jars to become part of the decor. This not only frees the room of heaviness, but also turns everyday objects into works of art, displayed in a way that feels both intentional and inviting. I once visited a neighbor who had removed the upper cabinets in her tiny galley kitchen. In their place, she installed simple white shelves. On them sat a collection of mismatched mugs, a row of old mason jars filled with dried herbs, and a small clock framed in gold. The space instantly felt open and bright, almost as if the walls had moved outward. She said she never realized how much calmer she'd feel just by seeing her kitchen breathe a little. The beauty of open shelving is that you can style it to reflect your personality. Rotate seasonal items, place a trailing plant on one end, or arrange cookbooks beside a stack of vintage bowls. And if you worry about dust, remember that these shelves encourage us to use our items regularly, keeping them both practical and beautiful. For a small kitchen, open shelving is not only storage, it's a gentle reminder that simplicity and airiness can bring more joy than a closed door ever could. In a small kitchen, counters are precious territory. Too many gadgets or piles of mail can make the space feel cramped, but a counter stripped bare can feel cold and lifeless. The secret is balance, keeping surfaces mostly clear while styling them with just a few thoughtful touches. A single cake stand with fruit, a floral teapot, or an open vintage cookbook propped on a stand can transform a functional surface into a scene of quiet romance. I remember helping my aunt declutter her tiny kitchen. She had every inch of counter space, filled blenders, spice racks, baskets of utensils. After gently storing most of it away, we chose just 3 pieces to leave out: a small cutting board, a ceramic bowl of lemons, and her grandmother's teapot. The change was immediate. The room felt larger, calmer, and somehow more elegant. She laughed and said it was the first time in years she enjoyed just standing in her kitchen. For your own space, try the 1 or 2 treasures rule. Keep counters clean for daily work, but display 1 or 2 items that bring you joy or beauty. Rotate them with the seasons: a vase of daffodils in spring, a copper kettle in winter. This approach keeps your kitchen practical, yet soulful, a place where work and romance coexist without clutter. In small spaces, simplicity styled with care is the truest form of charm. Fabric has a way of softening a room, and in a small kitchen, it can make all the difference. Ruffled curtains that sway with the breeze, gingham sink, skirts hiding storage, Or even a few linen tea towels draped gracefully bring warmth and romance to the space. These touches don't just decorate, they create movement texture and a feeling of gentleness that balances the harder surfaces of wood tile and metal. I once visited a widow who had transformed her tiny kitchen with fabric alone. She couldn't afford new cabinets or appliances, but she sewed floral curtains for the window, a soft skirt for the sink, and cushions for her little breakfast bench. The whole room glowed with color and comfort, like stepping into a quilt. She said those fabrics reminded her of her mother's kitchen, where nothing matched perfectly, yet everything felt like home. If sewing isn't your strength, don't worry. Thrift shops are full of inexpensive tablecloths, runners, or curtains that can be adapted. Even a secondhand sheet with a pattern you love can become a sink skirt with a few stitches or clips. Soft textiles not only warm a kitchen visually, but also absorb sound, making the space quieter and cozier. In a small kitchen fabric is a gentle invitation: come sit, rest, and feel at home. Chairs can sometimes feel bulky in a small kitchen, taking up more room than they give back. A wooden bench, however, changes everything. Slim and versatile, it tucks neatly against the wall and can seat more people than individual chairs ever could. When topped with soft cushions or a quilted throw, a bench turns into a cozy nook, perfect for morning tea, quiet reading, or sharing a meal with loved ones. It saves space while adding the warmth of cottage charm. I recall visiting a retired couple who had replaced their dining chairs with a single pine bench in their narrow kitchen. They had dressed it with handmade patchwork cushions, each stitched from fabrics collected over the years. Sitting there felt less like dining at a table and more like being welcomed into their life story. They told me the bench wasn't just seating, it was where grandchildren perched with cookies, where friends gathered for coffee, where the heart of their home came alive. If you'd like to try this, consider a secondhand bench from a thrift store or even an outdoor garden bench brought inside. Add layers of softness with cushions or tuck baskets beneath for hidden storage. A bench is more than furniture. It is an embrace, a way of turning even the smallest kitchen corner into a place of belonging. One of the simplest ways to keep a small kitchen feeling alive is by changing little details with the seasons. Instead of holding on to the same look all year, let your kitchen breathe with nature's rhythm. In spring, hang pastel floral curtains or place a jar of daffodils by the sink. In summer, swap in light linen napkins and bowls of fresh berries. Autumn brings warmth with plaid towels, pumpkins on the counter, or a vase of dried wheat. And in winter, soft red accents, pine greenery, or even a cozy candle can make the space glow. These seasonal touches don't take much time, but they invite joy into everyday routines. I remember visiting my sister one December when her kitchen was dressed with nothing more than a sprig of holly tucked into a pitcher and a checkered dish towel draped over her oven handle. The kitchen was tiny, yet it felt festive and full of spirit. She laughed, saying she didn't have money for big decorations, but wanted the space to sing with the season. That little gesture made her kitchen unforgettable. For your own home, keep a small box of seasonal accents, tucked away curtains, napkins, or small decor items you can rotate. This practice is inexpensive, sustainable, and deeply rewarding. A kitchen that changes with the seasons reminds us that life is always moving, always renewing, and even the smallest space can reflect that beauty. Shabby chic style celebrates the charm of things that are worn, weathered, and loved. In a small kitchen, these accents add soul without taking up much space. Think of distressed wood shelves, drawer pulls with faded patina, or a collection of mismatched ceramics proudly displayed. Instead of chasing perfection, this style leans into the beauty of imperfection: scratches that tell a story, paint that shows its age, patterns that don't quite match but somehow belong together. I remember visiting a woman who had decorated her kitchen almost entirely with hand-me-downs. Her open shelf held a chipped blue teapot beside a floral bowl missing its glaze, and her drawers had vintage brass pulls she found at a flea market. Nothing matched, yet the whole space felt unified, warm, human, and real. She said it reminded her that life itself is a little shabby chic, imperfect but beautiful when looked at with love. If you'd like to bring this touch into your home, start small. Replace one set of drawer handles with antique knobs or display a collection of secondhand cups on a shelf. Use an old wooden crate as storage, or let a chipped ceramic pitcher hold flowers. These details whisper of lives lived before us, bringing romance and depth into even the smallest of kitchens. Flowers have a way of bringing life into even the smallest kitchen. A single mason jar filled with lavender, a pitcher of daisies on the counter, or a bowl of dried rose petals on the windowsill can turn an ordinary space into something romantic and alive. Fresh blooms bring fragrance and color, while dried arrangements or floral prints on curtains and wallpaper keep the spirit blooming all year long. They remind us that nature belongs not only in the garden, but also in the heart of our homes. I once stayed in a friend's cottage where every corner of her kitchen had a gentle floral accent. On the table sat a small vase of wildflowers she'd picked during her morning walk. Above the sink, a faded floral curtain softened the sunlight, and beside her stove, she had tucked a bundle of dried herbs tied with ribbon. Nothing was extravagant, but together these touches created a sense of warmth and freshness that made her small kitchen feel endlessly welcoming. To bring flowers into your own kitchen, you don't need weekly bouquets. A thrifted ceramic jug can hold seasonal stems from your yard, or a sprig of rosemary can sit in a tiny glass on the windowsill. Even floral-patterned dish towels or wallpaper accents can add charm. These small gestures remind us that life, like flowers, is fleeting, but in their brief beauty, they fill our spaces with joy. Even the tiniest kitchen walls can hold a piece of your story. Whimsical wall art, whether it's a framed botanical print, a chalkboard menu with today's favorite recipe, or a vintage illustration tucked in a golden frame, adds layers of charm without taking up precious counter space. Unlike cabinets or shelves, wall art doesn't demand function. It offers personality, a quiet reminder of what you love most. I once visited a neighbor whose kitchen was no bigger than a pantry. On her wall hung a framed drawing her granddaughter had made a bouquet of flowers sketched in bright crayon colors. Next to it, she kept a chalkboard where she wrote a new uplifting quote every week. Though the room itself was simple, those little pieces gave the kitchen its spirit. She told me guests always stopped to read her chalkboard before they even noticed the food. For your own kitchen, choose art that makes you smile. It could be a thrifted painting of a meadow, a recipe card from your grandmother framed as a keepsake, or even a playful print of teacups. Keep the scale small so it doesn't overwhelm, and use frames that echo your kitchen's style: weathered wood for shabby chic or brass for a touch of vintage elegance. These walls then stop being blank and instead begin to tell your story, one picture at a time. Glass and crystal have a way of catching the light, bringing a sparkle that feels elegant without adding clutter. In a small kitchen, these materials can be used sparingly yet meaningfully. Think of glass knobs on cabinets, crystal pendants above the sink, or clear jars lined neatly on a shelf. Each piece reflects light, helping the room feel larger and brighter, almost as if the walls themselves have softened. Unlike heavy materials, glass whispers rather than shouts, offering romance and quiet glimmers. I once had tea in a friend's Victorian home where her kitchen was just a narrow passage with a small window. But she had installed a petite crystal chandelier overhead. When the sun streamed in, it scattered rainbows across the walls, turning her simple kitchen into something almost magical. She smiled and said it was her way of starting each day with sparkle, even if the room itself was humble. For your kitchen, you don't need grand gestures. A few clear glass jars for spices, a crystal bowl of fruit, or even a set of delicate drinking glasses on open shelving can bring elegance. The key is moderation. Too much glass feels sterile, but just enough creates charm. In a small space, a little sparkle reminds us that beauty doesn't always need to be large. Sometimes it shines most brightly in the smallest of details. In a small kitchen, little details matter more than we often realize. Coordinating your accessories, dish towels, cutting boards, mugs, or even utensils creates a sense of harmony that makes the whole room feel intentional. Instead of a jumble of colors competing for attention, the eye sees unity, and suddenly the space feels calmer, larger, and more welcoming. This doesn't mean everything has to match perfectly, just that your chosen palette guides the story. I once visited a cousin who adored the color sage green. Over the years, she collected small items in that shade: a teapot, a bread box, and even measuring spoons. None of them were expensive yet. When gathered in her tiny kitchen, they gave the impression of thoughtful design. Guests always assumed she had hired a decorator, but she laughed and said it was simply the joy of choosing one color and letting it weave through her space. To bring this into your kitchen, start with what you already own. Perhaps you love soft blues, or maybe dusty rose makes you smile. Gradually let that color appear in your linens bowls or canisters. Even if your cabinets or walls remain neutral, the accessories will tie everything together. In small kitchens, this gentle coordination provides not only beauty, but also peace, reminding us that order and charm can live side by side. One of the most romantic ways to decorate a small kitchen is by giving forgotten objects a second chance. A weathered window frame can become a shelf, an old bread box can serve as hidden storage, or a vintage suitcase can be repurposed into a quirky pantry for tea and spices. Repurposing isn't just practical, it carries a sense of history, reminding us that beauty can be reborn from what others overlook. I once knew a retired carpenter who turned a broken wooden ladder into shelves for his wife's kitchen. Each rung held jars of herbs and small pots of flowers. It wasn't perfect, but it was charming, and his wife loved it all the more because it carried his touch. That ladder, once destined for the trash, became the heart of their tiny kitchen. Guests never failed to admire it, and he would grin proud of creating something useful from nothing. For your own space, think of items tucked in attics or waiting in thrift stores. Old crates, chipped enamelware, or mismatched drawers can all find new life with a little imagination. These pieces aren't just decor, they are stories, reminders that our homes, like our lives, can bloom again after seasons of wear. In a romantic kitchen, repurposed finds whisper, "Nothing is wasted, everything has potential." A truly romantic kitchen doesn't shy away from contrasts, it celebrates them. Pairing sleek, modern elements with treasured vintage finds creates a balance that feels both fresh and timeless. Imagine a polished induction cooktop sitting beside a floral porcelain teapot, or a streamlined marble countertop paired with antique wooden stools. The tension between old and new doesn't clash. It sings, reminding us that beauty lies in harmony, not uniformity. I once visited a young couple who had renovated their small apartment kitchen. They kept the modern stainless steel appliances, but hung a set of their grandmother's embroidered linens by the window. On the counter next to the coffee machine sat a chipped ceramic bowl filled with lemons. The result was delightful. The kitchen looked contemporary, yet grounded, practical, yet personal. They said the mix reminded them that life itself is a blend of what we inherit and what we build anew. To try this yourself, don't be afraid of contrast. Let a sleek surface meet a rustic basket, or place a high-tech blender beside a crystal sugar jar. These juxtapositions highlight the individuality of each piece, while together they tell a story richer than either could alone. In a small kitchen, mixing old and new proves that opposites don't compete. They complement, creating a charm that feels authentically yours. In a small kitchen, even the tiniest detail can affect how the room feels. Symmetry is one of those quiet tricks that instantly brings calm. When shelves are evenly arranged, sconces appear in pairs, or matching jars frame the sink, the eye relaxes. The space feels more open, more intentional, and easier to move through. Symmetry doesn't mean stiff perfection, it means creating balance so your kitchen feels like a place of ease. I remember stepping into a farmhouse kitchen where the owner had placed 2 narrow shelves on either side of her window. On them, she arranged teacups and small potted herbs mirrored from left to right. The shelves themselves were plain, but the balance gave the entire wall a sense of grace. She told me she'd learned the trick from her grandmother, who always said, "A kitchen with balance makes the cook feel steady." And it was true, there was something reassuring about the order. You can bring this sense of calm into your own kitchen without spending a penny. Try placing items in pairs, 2 matching canisters, 2 framed prints, or a pair of sconces flanking a mirror. Even arranging your spices in neat rows can soothe the eye. In a world that often feels chaotic, symmetry offers a quiet comfort. In a small space, especially this simple principle creates the kind of harmony that makes your kitchen not just functional, but restful. Few features say romantic kitchen quite like a farmhouse sink. Wide, deep, and usually porcelain white, It carries a sense of nostalgia that instantly softens even the most modern space. In a small kitchen, a farmhouse sink becomes both centerpiece and workhorse. It's practical for washing big pots, yet its gentle curves and timeless design add an unmistakable coziness. Pair it with a brushed gold or matte black faucet, and suddenly, you've blended old-world charm with modern elegance. I once visited a friend who lived in a converted barn. Her kitchen was modest, but the farmhouse sink stole the show. She told me it reminded her of summers spent on her grandmother's farm when water would splash as she helped wash vegetables pulled straight from the garden. Standing at that sink, she felt connected to those memories, as if the past and present met in the basin's porcelain glow. It was more than a sink, it was a piece of family history. For your own kitchen, a farmhouse sink doesn't have to be out of reach. Many modern reproductions are affordable, and they fit beautifully in compact spaces. Even if you can't replace your sink, you can mimic the feeling with vintage-inspired fixtures or accessories. The essence of a farmhouse sink is about more than function. It's about creating a heart in your kitchen, a place where work feels warm and daily routines carry a hint of romance. A backsplash may be small in size, but in a compact kitchen, it can have a big impact. This narrow canvas behind the sink or stove is the perfect place to add personality and romance. Floral tiles bring a touch of cottage charm. White beadboard adds texture with simplicity, and soft mosaics shimmer just enough to catch the eye. Unlike paint, which can fade into the background, a backsplash stands proudly, giving the room both practicality and beauty. I once visited a family friend who lived in a cozy apartment above her shop. Her kitchen was only a few steps wide, yet she had chosen pale pink and cream mosaic tiles for the backsplash. They reflected light from the single window, and each time she cooked, the colors seemed to dance. She told me the backsplash was her favorite feature, not because it was expensive, but because it felt like jewelry for the room, a daily reminder of joy. For your own kitchen, think of the backsplash as a chance to express yourself. Peel and stick options make it budget-friendly, while salvaged tiles from thrift stores or flea markets bring history into your walls. Even beadboard painted in soft pastels can add character. The goal isn't just to protect the wall from splashes, it's to let your personality shine in a space that deserves to be as beautiful as it is functional. Every kitchen, no matter how small, holds space for a ritual. A coffee or tea nook can turn even the tightest corner into a place of comfort and delight. Picture a vintage tray holding stacked mugs, a floral tin filled with tea bags, or a small shelf displaying your favorite coffee beans in glass jars. These little arrangements don't take much room, but they invite you to pause, breathe, and enjoy the moment. A nook becomes less about storage and more about creating an atmosphere where daily routines feel special. I once stayed with a retired teacher who had transformed a sliver of counter space into her tea corner. There sat her mother's porcelain teapot, a jar of dried lavender, and a stack of hand-painted mugs. Each afternoon, she would prepare tea, humming softly, as sunlight streamed through her lace curtains. She told me that corner was her happy place, proof that even a kitchen, only a few feet wide, could feel expansive with the right touch. For your own home, you don't need elaborate setups. A tray on the counter, a basket hung on the wall, or even a rolling cart tucked to the side can serve as your nook. Add a few pieces that make you smile, whether they're heirlooms or thrifted treasures. What matters is the joy it brings, the reminder that life's sweetest moments often begin with a simple cup in hand. Light sets the rhythm of a kitchen, and in a small space, layered lighting creates versatility as well as charm. Bright overhead fixtures are helpful when chopping vegetables or cleaning, but softer side lighting transforms the same room into a romantic retreat. Wall sconces, under cabinet strips, or even a small lamp perched on a shelf give you control over the mood. With layers, your kitchen doesn't have just one personality, it shifts gracefully from bustling workspace to cozy sanctuary. I remember visiting my aunt during winter when the days grew dark early. She had layered her lights so beautifully, a pendant above the sink for tasks, fairy lights woven along a shelf, and a tiny lamp glowing near her cookbook stand. When everything else in the house felt cold, her kitchen radiated warmth. She said she never felt lonely there because the lighting made her space feel alive like a quiet companion during her evenings. For your own kitchen, start small. Add one softer light source, a vintage lamp, battery-powered candles, or under-shelf lighting. Pair it with your main fixture, and suddenly your room will feel multidimensional. Light doesn't just brighten walls, it shapes mood and memory. In a small kitchen, layered lighting turns ordinary moments into experiences that linger, reminding us that even the glow of a single bulb can carry romance. At the end of the day, the most romantic kitchens are not defined by tiles, colors, or furniture. They are defined by you. Adding personal touches transforms a kitchen from a picture in a magazine into a living, breathing space filled with meaning. Perhaps it's an heirloom teapot displayed on a shelf, a handmade linen draped over your table, or a framed quote that reminds you of love and family. These details don't follow strict design rules, they follow the rhythm of your heart. I once visited a dear friend whose kitchen, though modest, radiated warmth. On her wall hung a cross-stitched piece her grandmother had made decades earlier. Beside the stove, she kept a jar of wooden spoons carved by her father. None of these items matched the pastel cabinets or modern appliances, yet together they made her kitchen unforgettable. She told me, "When I walk in here, I see my story." That more than any design choice gave the space its beauty. For your own kitchen, think of what objects carry your story. They may not be perfect, polished, or trendy, but they are uniquely yours. Place them where you'll see them daily and let them remind you that your kitchen is more than a room. It is a canvas of your life filled with memory care and the quiet poetry of everyday moments. As we reach the end of our journey together, I hope you see that a kitchen does not have to be large or lavish to be filled with beauty. The smallest spaces often carry the greatest warmth because they hold the stories of our lives in every detail. Whether it's a chipped mug passed down through family, a curtain sewn from old fabric, or a single flower placed in a jar, these quiet touches are what give a kitchen its heart. I think of all the kitchens I've stepped into over the years: farmhouses, cottages, apartments, even tiny trailers. The ones that stayed in my memory were not the ones with the newest cabinets or the most expensive counters. They were the ones where love was visible, the smell of soup simmering, the sound of laughter, the sight of a shelf arranged with care. Those are the kitchens that stay with us long after the decor has changed. So, dear friend, may you feel encouraged to see your own kitchen as more than just a place to cook. Let it be a haven, a retreat, a corner of your home where beauty and memory live side by side. Which idea spoke to you the most today? I'd love to know. And if this visit brought you joy, I invite you to join me again by subscribing for more gentle inspiration. Until next time, may your hands continue to create beauty, and may your kitchen, no matter its size, always feel like home.